What's going on, everyone? I'm going to be covering Ripple today, and as always, nothing of what you're about to see is considered financial advice, and they're just my opinions. If you enjoy this content, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay guys, first things first, Ripple has been able to maintain our demand zone in green, and all this demand zone is essentially just a flip of this prior resistance level that we had on previous occasions until we had our point of breakout right here. We had a massive short squeeze and ultimately came down and then retested that point of breakdown area as support with acceptance clearly thereafter, and then even another retest recently. So that marks our current demand zone, and price looking really good at the moment, trying to flip this current SR resistance level, which you'll notice was really just our previous range high from over here, okay, from our high and our low until we reclaimed the equilibrium. And then, as I said, came back down, tested our demand zone, which ultimately retested that range's EQ, and clearly some indecisiveness in price right now at this point as it tries to reclaim the range high on the upside. Okay, so we see price chopping around here. We're looking for that clean breakout and retest of the range high. Okay, so that's our marked SR in red, which is a pretty big level to flip in my opinion, but so far so good. Ripple's also been able to maintain this general trend line. Okay, so off of the bottom down here that we had in June 22, we've generally been able to maintain that trend. So long as we can maintain that trend and flip this SR, then we start talking about flipping some higher levels towards the upside. And just to take a look at those levels to the upside, we've got our first target here at 66 cents marked out here. We got our next target at 75 cents marked out here, and then our next target at 92 cents or just under marked out here. And then of course we've got this $1.55 marked out up here with of course just under $2 sitting up above. So generally when I look at this chart right now standing back, objectively speaking, it really doesn't look too bad, but we have seen a history of manipulation on this one. And what I mean by that is something like this that we had back here in 2021/2020, where essentially we had our accumulation phase in yellow. We had some manipulation going on here, and then ultimately expansion thereafter. And this is sometimes referred to as the power of three, but more often than not, they'll look something more like this, where they're closer together and they pretty much happen in sequence, where there's a form of accumulation with a brief yet substantial manipulation event in red, which will ultimately take out a lot of stops in the process, and then expansion in price thereafter. We see it very often in cryptocurrency. So if we see that example, as I said, from back here in 2020/2021, and then even more recently, you've noticed maybe it happened right here in August last year. And Ripple seems to, for some reason, like to sweep the lows after a large move. So heavy supply pinch followed by a dump, and then ultimately taking out the lows from the prior accumulation. So it's just something to be wary of as we start to see more volatility, where if price starts to gain strength back and we break out of this downward trend, for example, we might start to see some serious volatility where price might even get manipulated one more time before ultimately getting that expansion. So as I said, just something to be wary of. And accumulation can take on different forms. Accumulation doesn't have to be necessarily horizontal and sideways. We can certainly get trending accumulation. Okay, we have seen it before. Okay, just back here since our 2020 dump, we had that accumulation range, which was ultimately trending in the grand scheme of things. So it could be the case that that's what we're seeing right now, but ultimately it's important to mark out that demand zone, because if we do get a dump from Ethereum or from Bitcoin, it is expected that we'll get a huge dump in the altcoin market. And I don't think Ripple will take exception to that. So we could definitely see a sweep of these lows into our demand zone for one final push. And then we get our reclaim of red SR here, which sits at about 55 cents, which is definitely a realistic and potential setup. However, if we do flip this SR in red sooner, then essentially that becomes our demand zone if we get that acceptance with price action above that level. And of course, I would really like to see a flip at that point of the exponential moving average here. This is the 100 EMA, and of course on the daily time frame, that would be a bullish trigger for me as well to flip and hold that EMA. And then there's a couple really key things in here that I want to see. So first things first is I want to see this range EQ reclaimed. So if we take our range, and I'm going to be a bit biased, I am taking it from the candle closes with the double top that we had back here in July, and then I'm taking it down to our wick on this dump in this capitulation event that we had in August. And the reason why I'm doing that is because the equilibrium of that range from the high and to the low sits right on this cluster of price, which moved around that equilibrium and reverted back to the mean until we ultimately had that point of breakdown and this massive capitulation. So essentially this is a key point of interest for myself, and that would basically be a load up before the train kind of takes off type scenario. So that's kind of more of a macro outlook on what I'm looking for to really entice me for for that next major leg to the upside. And then at that point, I'd be looking at these targets above. But until then, price could get some of that manipulation, as I said, or it might just maintain this overall trend and we just continuously grind up until we get another supply pinch, perhaps. Or as I said, we maybe get that one more flush scenario into demand to ultimately reclaim the SR, reclaim the macro range equilibrium, break out of this downward trend of resistance, and then it would be up from there. And I don't normally point out trends, but this one's hard to ignore. So we've got this trend of resistance right here, but we've also got this massive trend in parallel to that right here, which stems from this high that we had way back here in April 2021. And so I know a lot of traders look for that breakout of a trend, but oftentimes in crypto, you will see that breakout, which in turn turns into a fake out. We get that dump, we run a bunch of stops, and then ultimately at that point, we get our expansion. So you got to be careful for a play just like this. As I said before, you get fake outs like we had over here and like we had back in 2020/2021. People get liquidated, they lose their positions, they're over leveraged, and then they miss the move entirely, which typically can come pretty soon after. So the trick here would be to know that you're buying for the long term, you're buying spot, and you know that you're buying within an accumulation range, or in other words, you're buying towards the low or the bottom, and you know you're not buying kind of in that mid range. So I guess the idea is to remain patient, and if you believe in this one long term, dollar cost average in, so that you can avoid getting chopped up in any kind of manipulation event. You can sleep well at night, and price can do whatever it wants, but you will ultimately catch that next major move that's coming. And this trend actually can be extracted to the all-time high on Ripple, which sits at about $3. So if you extract that trend, you can see that in the next bull market, price actually was not able to breach the all-time high. Could be potentially due to the inflation of Ripple and its circulating supply. But either way, you can see that we are coming down to the apex of that trend at this point. So it could be due for a significant breakout for this coming cycle. But at the moment, as it stands, looking at current price action today, we do have a market structure break. Okay, when we put in these lows and we filled in this wick, we made this final lower high on the daily time frame, which we have now just recently broken with a fresh higher high and are currently retesting that market structure break. So for it to be valid, we need to start getting some form of relief pretty soon, to be honest, to take out this high and then to start to push up to this breakdown area in yellow, which is that range EQ, if you remember from our range high and our range low. Because ultimately it may not look like it, but we are trading inside of this range still. Price is still range bound, technically speaking. Now, another thing that I look for is relative strength. Relative strength is typically a good indicator of a trend reversal when we get a bullish divergence. So a bullish divergence is when price makes a lower low and RSI makes a higher low. And typically I like to stick to the high time frame for this because it'll mean it's more of a significant move that's to come. But ultimately, let's take RSI for example first. We start to see RSI do something like this. Okay, so we see RSI make a higher low, and coinciding to that, we see price do something like this where we make another lower low from that previous low. With this low in RSI coinciding with this low in price, and this low in RSI coinciding with this low in price. Okay, so they are the vice versa of each other. Higher low in RSI, lower low in price. Typically a form of a bullish trend reversal. It works the same way on a bearish trend reversal, but of course you're not taking it from the lows. You'd be inverting this and taking it from the peaks of RSI and the peaks of price. But anyways, that's what I'd be looking for as well in price for a temporary or a longer term trend reversal on high time frame. So at least the daily, even better on the weekly. Okay, so let's see if we can find a couple of examples where this has happened in the past. Okay, most obvious one, let's take it from the bottom that we had back here in 2020, okay? Here's the divergence in price, and here's the divergence in RSI. We had a low followed by a lower low in price, and we had a low in RSI followed by technically a subtle but higher low in RSI, which did in fact trigger a large trend reversal in the short term as well as ended up being in the long term. But there's major gains to be made even in the short term on a trend reversal, even if it's a false trend reversal. And what I mean by that is if price ended up coming to this point here and instead actually continued the drop, there's still major gains to be made on that trend reversal, the temporary trend reversal. This one, in fact, was, such a major divergence in price on this capitulation that it ended up marking our bottom. You can get some other examples as well. So this one over here with a bit of manipulation, as I said, but ultimately that lower low in price and higher low in RSI for a decent move to the upside and then continuation thereafter. So bullish divergences are everywhere if you know how to find them and you're just constantly looking for them. Currently, no glaring divergences in my opinion, but if we did get, say, that flush back down to our demand zone, as I said, and we end up making a lower low off of these lows in price, RSI very well may just make a higher low in comparison to this low down here, okay? If we do print something like that with a lower low in price on that manipulation or flush of liquidity, running those stops, that would be an absolute buy in my opinion. And I would expect price to have a significant reaction thereafter. So it's just a matter of what we're going to get, having a few different scenarios in mind, waiting for those triggers and jumping on those opportunities when they present themselves. In the meantime, guys, I hope you took something away from this video and it was helpful to you. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you all soon. Bye for now.